Time now to join Frank O'Callaghan for the next instalment of the series Dundalk's Radio and Television People. Part 8. In this episode we hear about the legacy of R.Q. O'Neill's Earl Street Dundalk, founded in the early 1900s. Brian O'Neill explains the beginnings as a tobacco shop, its evolution as a hardware merchant selling cookers, china sets, bicycles, paints and varnishes, sports, stationery, radios and televisions with brand names such as Bush, Ferguson, Grundig, GEC, Philips, Pi and Pilot. Tom Lamb shares anecdotes from his working days, servicing and repairing radios and television and installing television aerials.
Hello there again. With me in the studio now is Brian O'Neill from R.Q. O'Neill's famous place in Earl Street, and Tom Lamb, who I believe worked with Brian and his father back in the early days of Tom's working life. We'll come back to both of those issues in a moment. But Brian, in many ways, I'm talking to you in tribute to your family and to all of the people who worked in your company over the years, because you'd be a very renowned company in the business that you were in. Can you start by telling me when the company of R.Q. O'Neill's was set up?
I think in probably around about 1902, there were two brothers. One was George O'Neill, and he was the tobacconist. And R.Q. O'Neill came from Williamson's. But George O'Neill died, and then James O'Neill, another brother, came from Newry, where he worked as a tailor. So around about the 1902, and the tobacco shop. So they had a library. They developed photographs, tobacco, toys, stationery, legal stationery as well. And then R.Q. came a couple of years afterwards, and it was then hardware, farming.
Brian, you handed me, coming in the door, an excellent piece from the Dundalk Democrat on the 17th of March, 1906. Something I never knew, but you're after covering it there, the type of product that R.Q. O'Neill's sold at the time: account ledgers, day books, letter books, envelopes. It was more a stationery shop than anything else, was it?
Yeah. Oh, well, tobacco was a big product. I have at home a Stevens enamelled measurement of the weather, which is a very, very valuable. And Stevens ink was a big thing. We had an area chalked out or painted out on the platform down in Barrack Street, because our goods would be sent down in a carriage and would drop it on the platform.
You had your own area marked out, your product within
and so
there.
Had Williamson's, and had
good,
their own area. And it wouldn't be unusual at that time to maybe have a carriage full of bicycles. I mean, when you think that in the 1950s, we had a traffic warden or a policeman at Francis Street, Crow Street, around there, directing the traffic from Halliday's, Rawson's, and all over the place.
Hundreds and hundreds of bicycles coming up.
Thousands of bikes. Thousands of bikes.
People on the bars of the bicycles.
And they didn't have a licence.
Yeah, there were push pedals.
Yes, I remember that well.
They're great memories, Brian. Just a wee bit more about the train. Like, all that goods would have to be accumulated in Dublin and put onto your carriage and taken down.
Yes, and we had at that time a horse and a float. A float was a low carriage, so that you could put onto the float cement without having to lift it up. And we sold fireplaces. We didn't have to lift them up. They were very, very heavy. So we had a horse and a float, and every Sunday I had to go in and take the horse out, run it up and down the back of the shop, the yard, and feed it oats and water. That's what we did every Sunday. And then you see, people like Tom Lamb came into it and changed the equation, because it was round about when the televisions came in. We used to buy a Morris chassis car or van from Lockington's in Barrack Street. And then we would get Tommy McCardle, the coach builder, to build a low float on the back of that. So we had to get those things when Tom Lamb, because he wasn't very good at managing a horse and cart. So we had to get that for when the televisions came in. And of course, when I was thinking of televisions there today, it's an era of the 1950s. And, it was only, if you take 30 years just before that, this country went through the Civil War. And then more effectively was we went through the Second World War. So we were only in the early 1950s coming out of a huge problem for this country in our wealth. So when people came along to buy a television, they didn't have the money. So there was a firm called Cavendish's. And Cavendish's did the hire purchase for the televisions. Now, people were able to buy radios, and radios were still on the go, very important. But the television was the new...
Was that the Cavendish's that had the furniture factory down in Clonbrassil Street, or was that a different company?
No, it was a different company. Is that right, Tom?
Well, Cavendish's, they never had an actual factory. They used to buy furniture off furniture wholesalers. And the whole thing was based on hire purchase. If you wanted a bed, it was so much a week. If you wanted a wardrobe, it was so much a week. And that's the way things were I went into O'Conneill's around 1960. Now the horse and cart had gone. Brian might think I was there in the horse and cart era, but I wasn't. But everything was based on hire purchase. And Cavendish's, they had salesmen on the road. There was a Sean Farrell. He wasn't a local man. There was Tom Ruddy and Matt Ruddy. They were from out around Cooley somewhere. And they were out on the road, driving around in cars. One of them might go to Castleblaney, one of them might go to Carrickmacross, RD, and everywhere in between. If there was
obviously selling product,
they'd rap at the door and say, "Ma'am, do you want to buy a bed? It'll cost you $7 and $6 a week or whatever." That's the way it was done at the time, And then the television, it was the same.
I'm going to put Brian on the spot here, but when you started working at RQ O'Neill's, typically you in a typical Dundalk company, what was the wage rate like back in the day?
Well, in 1960, I have a very good memory. It was £1.10.
Which is fair enough, because I know of other establishments in town, and that was the wage of the day and stuff like that.
Of course it was, yeah.
Who else worked with you, Brian, in the television aspect of things?
Oh gosh, Des Downing.
Yeah, there was an actual manager of the radio and television department in RQ O'Neill's.
It wasn't me.
Well, you knew him very well.
Who?
Bobby Brown.
Oh, Bobby Brown, yes. He worked in McDonald's, the builders, before he came to us. And then he worked on the railway then before that. He went from the railway, Bobby Brown.
Did the growth of the television at the time demand a new man coming in like that to manage the business?
Yes, because in those days you had to have people to repair them to see that they were working. Nowadays you don't repair them, you throw them out, and it's like clothes, you throw them out and you buy a new one. But I don't want to be left out of this equation. I want to remind Tom, that when I went to work in Drogheda, my wages were a guinea, £1 1 shilling, and my digs were £4 4 shillings a week.
You were on a bit of a loser there, Brian. Yeah. Do you mind me asking, what did you go to Drogheda to work at or gain experience in?
I went to a firm called John Collins just to get experience. I also ended up in GEC in Dunleer. And one of the departments I went into was where you had these elements for irons and for cookers. They had to be dipped in acid. Now, there were no masks. There was no health and safety. In the same way as when Tom Lamb was sent out to go up on top of a roof There was no health and safety. There was no training. There was no nothing. Up you go, and that's it. Away you go.
What was the challenge of that, Tom? Like, had you nervous about? Were you nervous about getting up? And
No, not like a 17, 18, 19-year-old. Sure, you had absolutely no fear at all. And most of the houses in the town were 2-story, 3-story houses, apart from the ones down Roden Place, which could be 4 stories. So, you know, and at times we would have to borrow ladders off McDonald's, the builders, Eric McDonald. And the ladder, it would be a solid wooden ladder, about 40 foot long. And it was an awful job to get it up on the bigger houses. And you climb up on that, you would think nothing of it. You know.
the exuberance of youth.
Well, you know, as Brian was said, there was no health and safety or anything like that. But you just get on with it. You had to put a lashing set around the chimney, and you had to assemble the aerial, and there was a mast, and you had to carry that up on your shoulder. Normally
a windy day.
Oh yeah, or wet, or a mossy roof. That was the worst of the whole lot, because it was very easy to slip on it. And as Alan's father would tell you, he came from the same background. So there was many a day you went up on the roof and you didn't want to go up on it, but had to be done.
Then coming down was the other problem.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there was a radio and television shop in Dunleer. It was Duffy's in Dunleer. And Brendan Duffy, he was putting up an aerial and he actually fell and died.
Oh.
You know, that would have been
Never heard of that.
early on.
Brian, there was a gentleman by the name of, you mentioned there a moment ago, Des Downey. Des worked for R.Q. O'Neill's before he set up his own business, I believe, did he?
Yeah, he was called the television man.
Yeah. You'd know him better than me.
Well, I actually didn't know him because he was gone when I went into O'Neill's. And I think he had ambitions to go out on his own and start up his own business.
The research I was able to do about him, I couldn't find much other. He had a fairly big place. Was it in Roden Place at one stage? Or?
It was down past the Queen's.
Oh yeah, was it in Francis Street in Dundalk? And he had quite a number of television brands, and he advertised things like free installations, free aerials, free service, free tubes, free valves. Was that typical of the service that was being offered? All that freebies.
You see, I have to interrupt there. I couldn't afford that if I had to pay Tom here £1 a week. I couldn't afford to give away free areas.
Tom, you owe him money back.
Yeah, but Frank, you see that like that as you know, all advertisements you have to take with a grain of salt, you know.
Yeah.
But the television, the stand for the television, if you want it, or the small table, the aerial, the cable, all that was included in the 7 and 6 or 10 shillings a week.
Oh yeah, so I'm reading the ad now. They weren't actually free. You were paying for them. You were
in technically you were paying for them. You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You know.
And Brian, was there a gentleman by the name of Michael or Mickey Keenan who worked for you at one stage? Because that name keeps turning up. Yeah. Tell me something about him.
I don't know that much. I remember him, that's about all, but I don't remember what he did after.
Somebody told me that he had a workshop down O'Hagan's Lane in Park Street as well, where he did a lot of his own repair work.
That was his own. Well,
was he a bit of a freelancer, was he? He seemed to work for everybody.
He did. The one thing about Mickey, he knew everything about radios and he knew everything about television. Now this would be in the valve era. There was no such thing as semiconductors or transistors or integrated circuits.
Where did he get like that learn his trade, or was it? Well, did he pick it up himself?
He actually worked in one of the coal yards, either Loughton's or Connick's, as a coalman first. He actually told me that he started off as a coalman, and he just picked it up, and he would have been buying at that time those. A magazine, Practical Wireless, and there was a lot of technical articles in it. And he had a talent for it. He was a natural, you know. And like when I was in technical school when I met him first, and he knew my father. My father was in the post office, and he told me I have a young fellow that's interested in radio and that type of thing. And he said, come down to my workshop at the back of O'Hagan's shop beside the Roma.
He was willing to share what he had.
Oh, yes. And I went down there at night. And then he got me the job in RQ O'Neill's because he was working in O'Neill's in the daytime.
Brian, I want to go back a step or two. You mentioned to me earlier that there was a B&I service, British and Irish steam packet company, was it? They came into Dundalk Harbour in
Yes.
the 50s and 60s. How did that operate and what was that all about?
Well, we would go down and collect goods from it. At that time, we took in China in big barrels. Now, the barrel would be 5 foot tall, 3 foot in diameter, and it would have the china in it and straw. And again, if you think of the early 50s, is it coupons you call it? They were relevant to Northern Ireland, so they weren't allowed to. The manufacturers in England wanted to export, so we would put the china on the floor on a Saturday, and we'd sell everything every Saturday.
You display it on the floor and people walk in and pick what they wanted.
Yeah. Well, no, it was China 21-piece China tea sets.
All right, yeah, the full
It
set.
wasn't vases.
They were
on it.
popular back in that time, weren't they?
Yeah, oh yeah. We also, and I'm looking here at an invoice, 3rd of December 1915, a gallon of number 2 petrol. We sold petrol. We had petrol pumps out on Earl Street. Remember, when you went from Belfast to Dublin, you had to pass Earl Street. We had petrol on the left-hand side, and it was 2 shillings a gallon.
There's a new one for us. I never knew that, Brian. And all the photographs I've seen of your premises over the years, I've never seen petrol pumps outside.
Mex petrol. We sold Mex petrol.
That's amazing. That will be news to the listeners.
And RQ O'Neill also sold paraffin oil for paraffin oil heaters. And there was a pump up at the top of the shop.
That's right.
And you could go in with your gallon can, and the shop assistant, whoever it would be, he would wind the handle on this and he would fill out a gallon into a gallon measure and pour it into your can.
No, he would pour it directly into your can because the wind handle was set to a gallon
right.
or a half gallon.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So it would measure, and therefore it had to go through the weights and measure sergeant who used to come in. I remember him. He used to come in. We used to sell putty and the powder for paints, and our 1 pound, half a pound ounces all had to be stamped underneath and had to be checked by the weights and measures man.
So it was strictly controlled, was it?
Oh, it was, yeah.
No messing about.
No messing about that. No.
Brian, we're going to pick on a name here, but I'll let you do it. Talk about the people who worked for you, because even in my recollection, you had some great people in there. I remember the name Joe Malloy that Tom mentioned. The Johnny Duffy working in there as well. A lot of people like that would be well known to our listeners.
There was Paddy Dunn, and Paddy Dunn now was a brother of one of the Dunn brothers that had the furniture shop in Kilbraston Street. There used to be Dunn's, used to sell furniture there. He was a very, very loyal, long member there. He was the one that we would have in charge of the guns, and he'd be in charge of the fishing. Because we used to, at that time, we had an agency for Hardy fishing rods, and there was only 4 people in Ireland had it. But then we sold Luigi Franchi guns, and we sold... I remember when President Kennedy came to Dundalk, the CIA and our Secret Service had sniffer dogs and were going all around the different premises. And they suddenly went down to my cellar. And so the dog went mad. We'd nearly 100 guns in the cellar and thousands of rounds of ammunition.
Was there a control in selling them, or could you just sell them?
Yes.
And
But
what
again, like that, I remember in 1965, Paddy Dunn, he was great at window dressing. He got logs and ferns, and he got, Tom O'Hagan was able to get stuffed pheasants and foxes and things like that, put in the window, and we put the guns in the window. And I'd go home at night, and I'd forget to take them out, and they'd be in the window overnight. The guns in the window, you know.
Yeah. And when did all that stop? Like, surely that had to stop in some point in time. Where
Well, the guns in the window stopped in 65. You know, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that after 65.
That was gone at
but
that
you know,
stage,
you would do it in the 50s and early 60s. You know.
You had to have a gun cabinet and it had to be locked. But it was just an ordinary lock that you'd buy in the hardware shop.
Yeah, shop lock.
Yeah.
And well, the cabinet was room. I mean, it was half the size of this room.
One thing about Paddy Dunn that a lot of people will remember, he always had a Santa Claus in the window, and he had a stick like Charlie Chaplin's stick, and he had a position in such a distance from the glass that it was some sort of a mechanism in the Santa Claus, and it would strike the window.
It was great for getting young people over.
Exactly.
And their parents after them, and then into the shop.
Paddy Dunn was an expert at window dressing. But the one thing about Paddy, if Paddy was dressing the window, you couldn't ask him to do anything else.
That was a chore at the time. Brian, I'm looking at an invoice here going back to October 1953. And if it's all right for me to name the name, it was to a Mrs. Trainer from St. Bridget's Terrace. And the invoice was for £15 for one baby Bellingham Cooper. I'll say that again. One baby Bellingham Cooper. And I looked it up today. They were manufactured in the UK, and they were big business at the time, were they? How big a business was that for you?
We sold we actually sold Aga cookers at one stage, but we weren't too much into the big cookers. We sold an awful lot of paraffin oil cookers, believe it or not. I'm not sure about the belling. I can't remember that.
The baby belling, as far as I remember, it was around the physical size of the old big tea chests. And it was a tabletop cooker. You could put it on the top of a table.
How did it work?
You had to plug it in. There was, I think it was 3 rings on the top, and there was 2 elements in the oven. The oven would be about 2 foot by 2 foot, something like that. That's why it was called a baby, because the standard belling cooker was a floor model. But the baby belling,
That's exactly what it was.
You could put it on a desk.
Just let me go back a minute. I talked about that invoice to Mrs. Trainer in St. Bridget's Terrace. I also have a document here for Mrs. Trainer for 88 St. Bridget's Terrace, and it's in relation to a wireless telegraph licence that was issued in 1947 at 12 shillings and 6pence. And I found this. These 2 documents, incidentally, Brian, were given to me from the museum. They had them down there. And the above-named person is hereby authorised, subject to the Wireless Telegraph Act 1926 and the Wireless Receiving Licence Regulations of 1937, to keep and have possession of apparatus for wireless telegraph or receiving only. So that was a big deal. You had to have a licence.
Put it in the context of Tom's wages per week. It's 3 months.
Well, it was a few. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we think.
I do realise I paid him too much.
That's twice you said that, Brian. Tom, you owe money back.
And Frank, if you notice on it, it was for receiving only.
Yes.
And that was put in so that you wouldn't start transmitting. That's why that clause is in the old licenses.
So
You know.
Brian, go back to the televisions just for a moment. What brands had you at the time?
The ones I can remember are Bush, Ferguson, Grundwig, GEC, Philips, Pi, Pilot. And the Pi was the most popular one. It was made in Dundrum, in Dublin. And it had that, at the first ones came out, it had a kind of a washboard in the front. And you lift down the washboard and you switched it on and off. And
I have a little chart, it's not in front of me at the moment, from all the companies in Dundalk who distributed televisions. And the Pi seems to be the primary television sellable product at the time. And I think you made the point before, Tom, it had a better signal or something, did it?
Well, see, the fact it was assembled in Dundrum and Dublin, you could get it quicker. You know, like the Echo-Push that they come along later on. But the first one first what they call multi-channel was a model called a VT4 Pi, and it had a 14-inch screen. Now, you measured it on the diagonal. You know, like it wasn't top to bottom or left to right. It was on the diagonal. In other words, the longest distance, that was 14 inches. And then the VT7 was a 17-inch. And as Brian was saying, there was a thing like a washboard in the front, and you folded it down, and there was an on-off and volume and brightness on one side, and a channel change on the other side, and a fine tuner.
the other thing I'm going to say is that, again, in the early 1950s, I mean, there was no money. There was no money. And the shop was open till 8 o'clock at night. And that was when the farmers came in. I mean, we were a farming town. All the farmers from around came in on the Saturday. And one of the things I remember about the televisions, we had to move them because if we put the screen on, everybody would come in and be watching it. So we had to put it upstairs somewhere else and away from where we were selling everything else. And again, the programme then was Match of the Day. Match of the Day was the big one at that time. And we got that because we had a Belfast signal. Now, Waterford and Wexford could have got a Wales or a Welsh signal.
Yeah, we were better serviced because we were on the border, is it? Yeah.
And we didn't care about Dublin anyway at those days.
And there was television didn't come in. I joined GEC in 1961, and RTE started around that time.
They come in on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. Brian, there's another aspect of what you said there about putting the television away at the back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they do that in big stores now where they put the most popular product away at the back so that you have to walk past everything else that's in the store. You were up.
We weren't that clever.
Oh, you were, Brian. You were that clever.
No, we weren't that clever. We couldn't have the amount of people who were coming in to watch the television blocking up the shop.
Mm.
Well, just in passing on television, there was a boys' club up at Joe McEntee had a boys' club, and there was a membership. Like, say there was 20 in it, but Joe McEntee bought a floor model 14-inch Echo TV. I think it ended up there was about 60 in the club when the television arrived. And everyone would sit on the floor with your arms folded watching this little TV. I'm just after remembering that, you know.
How popular was the Echo brand?
It was, I know the most popular brand was Pi, Bush and Philips. Then the Echo was more expensive, and they went in more for fancy cabinets, you know, and they had a patent of their own, like it was the 405 line system, and you could actually see the lines on the screen, not like the high definition TV you have today. And if a car passed, you'd get white spots on the screen. You know, it wasn't a great system, but it was late years ahead of what had gone before it, which was...
You should bring that up, because I remember that back in my own time. We used to call it the snow.
Yes, yeah. Well, if you're in a weak area, you get snow. Yeah. And Dundalk being 50 miles from Belfast, was what they call the fringe area. So you had to have fringe aerials to improve the signal as much as possible.
Just going back to the Echo, the only company in Dundalk that I found who sold Echoes was ITV Rentals in Clonbrassil Street. I found no other company who sold the Echo.
I worked there.
Yeah. Brian, before we wrap up, what other wee story would you like to tell us about your company? What's your great memory up there?
I think it would be about my father, and it would be about a story that a particular woman came in to me to tell me. And again, I go back to the bicycles and girls in particular. You know, in those days, there was no university. You know, you leave school, you go, you get your job, and that's it. And it's great that it's not like that nowadays. But this woman came in with her two daughters, 16 and 15, leaving school, going to get a job either in Clark's, Rawson's or whatever. And how are they going to go to it? They were from the country. My father said, pick your bicycles and pay me when you get your wages. And that era, I always think in my head, whether I'm right or wrong, is that was the era of trust. If somebody gave you your word was your bond. You wouldn't buy anything that you couldn't afford, or you wouldn't buy something that you weren't going to pay for. So that little wee story just pleases me that we gave a service. And by the way, that worked both ways, because when you did something like that for the customer was loyal. The customer was loyal back to you and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you have a customer for life.
Yeah, a lovely way to end today's program. Thank you very much, both of you. Lovely stories and a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
In this, the 8th programme in the series, we heard Brian O'Neill recount the beginnings and progression of RQ O'Neill's in Earl Street. Tom Lamb remembered the Pi VT4, which had a 14-inch screen and what was called fringe aerials to improve the signals from the Belfast transmitter 50 miles away. In the next programme, Rory Hall tells us about the beginnings of the radio depot in Jocelyn Street, and we hear a recording from Frank Baldwin, who is the grandson of W.P. Baldwin, who had a radio shop in Park Street, later relocating to Bridge Street in the 1930s. The series, Dundalk's Radio and Television People, was researched and presented by Frank O'Callaghan and recorded and edited by Alan Byrne.